Greetings, everyone. My name is William Porter. Welcome to this edition of Storytelling Time. This program is brought to you by Every Black Entrepreneurs Network. And today's podcast is an interview session, and I'm very happy to have with us today Ms. Netta Edwards, otherwise known as Chef Netta. And we're glad to have you on the podcast today, Netta.
Woohoo! I'm so happy to be here.
Great. The first question I have for you is about your name.
Mm-hmm.
And through emails that you've written to me, you've addressed yourself as Chef Netta. But I found out that your actual name is Shanetta.
That's correct.
So the question is, which do you prefer, Shanetta or Chef Netta?
That is a great question, Dr. William. I prefer Chef Netta. Here's why. I work with a lot of kids on the farm that I work at. And sometimes I've been working schools. And oftentimes it's really hard for them to say Chef Netta. It's just too many syllables. And so because of that, I've just kind of shortened it to Chef Netta. And so it kind of flows better. And also I kind of like for my friends and family to know me under Shanetta, while in the public figure is more Chef Netta.
Well, I have to admit that Shanetta was more comfortable for me.
Oh, okay.
As far as pronouncing your name.
So that means you're family and friends then.
Okay, well that's great. That is great. Well, listen, I read your bio and your title is Chef and Nutrition Educator at Spring Forest Community Gardener, if I'm correct in that.
That is correct.
So where exactly is this located?
It is located in the beautiful city of Hillsborough. And if you know anything about Hillsborough, it is where a lot of writers, retired, like doctors, lawyers, they all go out there because it's so peaceful. And what I have found is if you're not in that category, you're a farmer. And then that also kind of coincides with the peacefulness. But on the farm that I work at, there's goats, there's chickens, there's fig trees, there is a hoop house full of tomatoes and cucumbers and kale and Swiss chard, and we have a medicinal herb garden, and then we also have garlic, herbs. So really, right now, the summertime is the best time for harvest because it's not only like a lot of vegetables, but it's also colorful, and colors equal nutrition.
Well, this show goes all over the country and, in fact, all over the world. And for individuals who may not know where Hillsborough is, I would say it's about maybe a half hour from Durham, North Carolina.
That's right.
And this show originates in the Raleigh-Durham area of North Carolina, for those of you who are not familiar with this particular area. Well, I tell you what, Shanetta, I'd like to know a little bit more about your culinary business.
Ooh.
So what are your responsibilities from day to day?
So I have a catering company. It is a farm to fork catering company. And what makes me a little different than other caterers is that I'm working with local farmers. I'm, building networks and building relationships with them so that way I know exactly what is going to be for harvest. That then helps me to indicate what the menu is going to be. So you as a consumer may reach out to me and say, hey, I want to have a catered event. I'm always going to ask you what's the theme, because the food should tie in with the theme, right? So if we're having a ladies' luncheon, I'm not going to have like heavy steaks and like baked potatoes. Like it's just not going to fit it. But what I will do is provide like cute sandwiches, cucumber sandwiches, maybe have some beautiful array of like edible flowers on the decoration. Make sure there's more of a lighter flair. And so because of that, my day-to-day changes based on the event. So for instance, today I did have a catering Actually, it was yesterday. I did a lunch, dinner, and a lunch for the same group. And it was women from all across the country, from California to Washington State, and they all came here because they had been together on a Zoom for 2.5 years but had never met. So they actually came for this meeting, and I created a menu based on that. So we did like a fantastic like gourmet grilled cheese. So I'm talking, 3 different types of cheeses, the herbs, and then I did a wonderful soup. So the day to day really does vary. For that, I went into the garden. I got the farmers to go ahead and harvest me some basil, some zucchini, some okra, because I was doing a soup with that. And I rarely go to the grocery store because everything is just from the land. And then from there, I'm creating my prep list. I am super organized. And I like to write things down. So Monday, I'm doing this. Tuesday, I'm doing this in order to prep for the main event. Because my thing is, I don't want to be rushed, and I don't want my clients to feel like they're being rushed. It's all about slow food, and so slow food creates the best food.
Now, I know you're dealing with local farmers, but it seems as though the extent of your business is nationwide. Is that correct or not? Or do you deal primarily with the local population for the most part?
So you're speaking it into existence. So the goal is, yes, to go nationwide. Absolutely. But right now I am starting. The business has been about 2 years since I've been doing this. And so right now it is very much local. The Durham, Hillsborough, Raleigh location right now.
Okay. And I was going to ask you this earlier, but I forgot to ask the question, and that is, how long have you been in this position? I think you mentioned 2 years.
2
Is
years
that correct?
as my own boss. However, I went to culinary school 20-something years ago. I'm telling my age. And then I worked in catering facilities all across like the Triangle area. I was catering manager at restaurants, and so I was the one kind of like organizing the supplies, ordering the food, talking to the clients, making sure that the trucks are going out at the proper time. So I've been doing this for at least 15 years, but the last 2 has just been my baby.
By the way, is there a restaurant that I might be familiar with that you work with?
Let's see. So funny enough, the majority of ones that I work with have closed down. But I'm sure it's not because of me. But Macaroni Grill, you may have, they had one in Raleigh, there was one in Cary, one in Durham. So I worked with them for like 4 or 5 years. Panera Bread, yeah, I worked with them as well. Worked in the catering department. And then just local restaurants like in Durham.
Okay, great. Now, obviously, you have a passion for what you do. Has that always been the case, or how did you get started doing the business?
It's so funny. I was just telling this story to someone that I met yesterday. I, at 4 years old, would go to my aunt's house. She had an in-home daycare. And I remember watching PBS. So we would watch like Sesame Street, Mr. Rogers, all the fun things. But I remember very vividly every time Julia Roberts would come on, I would stop whatever I was doing and stand in front of the TV and just be in awe of her presence. I love her quirkiness. I love how she just she made food fun. It wasn't like this oh, you have to have this amount. She was just like, oh, I got this, I got that. And so she really nurtured that side that I didn't know I had a passion for. And as I got older, I started watching like culinary shows and chef shows and experimenting in the kitchen, which sometimes wasn't so fun for my parents. But I just kind of started to hone my skill. And that skill turned more so into passion as I started working more in the industry, learning more, going to culinary school, and picking up other cultures. I think that's important too.
Now, I may be telling my age as well, but I remember Julia Childs from way back. I don't know if you've heard of the name or not. But anyway, more recently, Emerald, of course.
Oh, yes.
And
yes, bam.
So, yeah. And but anyway, listen, we're going to take our first break, and we'll be back in just a minute. And stay with us. We'll be back with Netta Edwards.
Yes, hopefully we'll be cooking.
Welcome back. We're here with Ms. Shanetta Edwards, better known as Chef Netta. And she's out of the Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina area, actually working in Hillsborough. And we're happy to have Shanetta with us. And this is a question that I was really interested in knowing. And that is, and you may have touched on it earlier, but tell our audience again, how exactly did you come up with the name Chef Netta?
I came up with the name Chef Netta because my name is Shanetta. However, working with kids is a little too many syllables to pronounce Chef Shanetta. So I broke it down to Netta, which is half of my name.
Right, and you mentioned that. I remember. Listen, you also indicate in your bio that you're a grant writer.
Yes.
And I'd like to know more about that.
Okay, well, before I go into that, I must have full disclosure that I am not a professional grant writer, but I have wrote a grant, and it was about a ministry. It was about a year ago, and it was a ministry through the farm that I wanted to create hands-on nutrition education with kids. I called it HONE, and so the concept was to go into schools in Hillsborough first, and then expand out, but bring a mobile kitchen with me. I would bring my ingredients from the farm, and then I also bring a hydroponic, so we can not only eat the food, but we also can start to grow the food. And through that, I knew I needed money, and so they really helped. The farm helped me to find. Elaine Heath is the abbess there. She helped me to find a grant through G-Corps, and she gave me all the tips, and she just told me to look for the keywords that is in the application and apply that into the response. And so the reason I say I'm not a professional is because I did have to have someone look over it just to make sure all my I's were dotted and T's were crossed. But what I learned in that is it was not an easy experience, but it was so well worth it because I was able to get that $10,000 I needed in order to provide for kids. And so I would just kind of tell anyone, just dip your toe in it. Like, take your time. It'll be well worth it. And even if you don't get it, keep chugging at it and look for other grants.
I'm familiar with grant writing because in my past career I was a professor at a local university, and I wrote grants.
Very nice.
And received some and was rejected with others. But and so it is an experience.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, give us some advice, any advice that you might have as far as writing is concerned for some of our younger entrepreneurs, especially if they have to write an article or want to write an article or a book for that matter. What kind of advice could you give them as far as improving or at least getting started with writing?
Sure. The first thing that came to my mind was AI. I know right now AI is very big, but that is something in grant writing that you really don't want to use because they're going to have a system to test or detect if you are using artificial intelligence in order to write this grant. So the first thing I would say is take that component out. What I would then do is, whatever the question is, answer it in bullet points. Allow yourself to know your whys. And then from your whys, then you can format it into a sentence. I think that's the biggest thing. A lot of times we'll see the question and we're answering it to what they want. And to an extent you are. But at the same time, you're also offering what you can give them. And so it's important for you to have your whys and be passionate about that in order to have both what they want and what you want. And then my third thing would be to have somebody look over it. And maybe they're not a professional grant writer, but if they're a wordsmith or somebody that is, very understanding of the flow of words, then I would absolutely allow them to look it over. And then I'll add one more fourth thing in there if you don't mind. The library has a lot of wonderful resources, and a lot of times they will even help you out for free. So starting there, but you do want to go with something, right? You don't want to just show up and just say, "Help me with grant writing." Having something in mind, so that way they can kind of help you.
Well, in this particular area of the state and of the country, there are a number of universities in the area where you have professionals who write grants, and that can be taken advantage of as well, as you probably know. Well, listen, one other thing before we go on to another break, and that is I want to know a little bit more about the outdoor kitchen that I saw in your bio. Tell us about the outdoor kitchen. Describe it as far as what it's like in your business.
No problem. So I have to say the outdoor kitchen is my baby. Because I just have a passion for cooking. It is everything. So we started off at the farm with just an open fire pit. I would bring my skillet. We had someone would build a fire, and I would just cook potatoes or whatever we're harvesting. And then over time, they were able to get a grant funding. And so they built this outdoor kitchen with me in mind. And I helped them to kind of like format the flow of the kitchen, what's going to work best. So it is under a gazebo, and it does have brick floors. So that's super helpful. There is a wonderful smoker out there that I have used for like turkeys and salmon and things of that nature. We have a flat top. So if you are a griller or outdoors person, you're familiar with the flat top. It's made by Blackstone. So we have that out there with a propane tank. I still have my electric skillet, so I'll bring that out there. There are two drawers or two islands in the middle of that. And so we have two because we have so many kids. I mean, we're averaging 25 kids a week. And so we have to have enough space for them to help out. And so if you imagine in the middle, there's two islands. And then the parameters of it, there is a 3-compartment sink because that makes it so much easier. Next to that sink is a really tall cooler. It's not really a refrigerator. It's a cooler that has like a clear mirror so that way we can see what's in there. Next to that is the flat top. Next to that is the smoker. Then next to that is 2 cabinets where we keep all the, cutting boards, the bowls, the supplies, all of the things. And then to top it all off, the creme of the creme, we have string lights that we plug in. And so it's great during the day, but as the evening kind of approaches, it just brings in the glory.
Okay. Let me ask you this. The Grow It program, is that related in any kind of way to the outdoor kitchen or not?
Absolutely. It is related.
Well, tell us about that.
Sure. So Grow It program is through the farm is called Spring Forest. It is in Hillsboro. It is associated with the Methodist Church. And so what they do is they provide a space for families to come out for free to do a full sensory experience. That's what I like to call it, because it is. You go out there, you're going to have yoga with the kids. The parents are typically there. And it's open to all ages. However, because it's a year-round program, a lot of times it's only like 5 and under because the older kids are in school. So the mom and the kids, they'll do yoga. After they do yoga, they'll sing a song. Then they come into the outdoor kitchen. Under the island that I described, there's a bunch of buckets, like hand buckets, or there's baskets. The kids pick whatever baskets they want. And note, shout out to Goodwill because that's where I went to get the baskets. There's wood ones, plastic ones, colorful ones. And so this didn't take a lot of money to do. So they would grab their baskets. From there, they would bypass me, go out into the farm, harvest what they has been designated to do. They come back to that 3-compartment sink. They wash everything. From there, then we have kids safety knives, so they're like plastic knives, and they start cutting them. And so we'll have different stations set up. And so as they're cutting them, I'm already on the flat top preparing something because, we have basically 2 hours to do all this. But once they're done cutting, we make smoothies with them. Most kids have never even had a vegetable until they come out to the farm. And they always say, I don't eat vegetables. And then by the end of it, they're drinking the smoothie that has kale in there. They're eating the food that has, spinach in there or bok choy or whatever else, an array of vegetables. But once they finish chopping, they go out into a trail because we have it's a 2-mile trail, but I believe they only go for like 20 minutes. They come back. By that time, everything that they have chopped and washed is already in the meal. So by 11:30, 11:45, we're eating. And we have a full spread. This is not like a little cheese and cracker snacks. We're eating like courses and meals.
While growing up, I didn't eat like I should have eaten as far as having nutritious meals. But I think, like a lot of kids, the tendency is to go toward the non-nutritious items, options. And I think this is great as far as getting our young people, especially the very young, and I forget the age that you mentioned. You're talking about, what's the age that you're talking about?
It's open to all, but because it's year-round, typically it's 5 years old to young.
Okay.
And the youngest I've seen is a month old, strapped to a mom's, chest. So
in other words, kids get to know about good nutrition early on,
very much.
Which will influence, of course, their decisions to eat correctly as they get older, which is very significant because it's tied to health, longevity, and we can move on and talk
mental.
about a lot of mental.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyway, listen, we're going to take another break, and when we come back, I have a couple of other programs I want to mention and ask you about, and then we're going to be very close to closing this session of the program. So we'll be back in just a minute with Netta Edwards.
Yes.
Welcome back. We're with Ms. Netta Edwards, and she's a local business person here in the Raleigh-Durham area out of Hillsborough, North Carolina. And I asked you about 2 or 3 programs that you're involved with prior to the break, and I'd like to ask you about 2 or 3 others, and then we're going to talk about what you will be focusing on the next session that you'll be with us.
Fantastic.
But anyway, the first one that I want to mention in this segment that I need more information or like to have more information on, and that is you indicate that your menu is based on the USDA My Plate and Dietary Guidelines for Americans program. So tell us about that.
Sure. So one of my backgrounds is culinary arts, but my focus is nutrition, and with me just graduating with a master's in food and nutrition, I learned very early on into the career that the USDA, we have kind of recommendations put in place. And I can remember when I was a kid, it was called my pyramid. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Yes.
And so again, I'm telling my age, but it was the pyramid, and so you got to see like the ascension of different foods. They recommended that sweets should be used like very sparingly, while fruits and vegetables should be used more. That has now transitioned into My Plate, and the reason that it has is because what they found is the pyramid didn't really work as well because it didn't break down the lifespan of the individual. It didn't break down the cycle or where you are. So a 20-year-old is going to eat far differently from a 70-year-old based on their caloric needs. And so with the USDA, I incorporate that into my culinary business, my catering business, and with Grow It. And what we do is we figure out what is needed. The average individual may not know, but we're supposed to be eating 9 to 11 servings of fruits and vegetables. And while that may sound like a lot of times it can be incorporated into things like a smoothie, or it can be incorporated into a salad. And things like drinking water. If you don't drink a lot of water, or if you don't like it, you can eat things that have more water content, vegetables or fruits such as cantaloupe or celery. So you can still abide by the recommendations without even really trying as hard.
I mentioned earlier that my upbringing was characterized by eating foods that were not the healthiest foods in the world. And one reason for that is because although I ate vegetables growing up, they were cooked. And of course, when you cook vegetables or when you cook food in general, the nutritional value is taken away. Speak to that just a second.
Sure. So I'm going to speak from two different ways. Another thing I did pick up on in my master's is sometimes people can't afford to have fresh fruits and vegetables, and I think that's important to address. Sometimes it's just a matter of getting fruits and vegetables in and not really worrying about that concept. So I'm going to speak from the aspect of a low income person. Being able to dismiss the idea that canned vegetables are terrible. At least you're getting something. Recommendation is if that's all you can buy, that's fine. But when you do get it, opening it up, rinsing it out with some water, so that way you can get the nutritional value out of it and not the sodium. On the other side, I'm going to look at it from the perspective of if you have the choice and you have the resources to. Absolutely, if you can get fresh, that is going to be the best. And even better if you go local. What I have found is when I get local produce, it lasts so much longer than when I go to the grocery store. That's because it's typically sprayed with things. You don't know how long it's been sitting in their refrigerator or cooler before it's gotten to you. You also building a relationship with that farmer. And, the younger generation loves to talk about environment, which is very important. But if we look at that, it's great for the environment too, because it allows that farmer to create or to grow diversity of crops, which would then speak to the soil nutrients as well as just kind of climate change and allowing us not to have as much waste.
It sounds like you're talking about this produce project, formerly known as the Bridge the Gap program. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Pretty much?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It went from a nonprofit organization to a profit organization. So the Bridge the Gap was more so where they would provide free produce to the community. Produce Project is a facility where they provide community-supported agriculture. So you pay a certain amount each week. Whatever is left over then will be donated to the community.
Okay. Just for your information, I've developed my own nutritional outline, I guess you might say, of what you don't do. And I come up with this. Don't do sugar, or at least a lot of sugar, or minimize your intake of sugar.
Absolutely.
Minimize your intake of salt.
Yes.
And minimize your intake of fat. Those
Yes.
three things.
Yes.
And I think if you do that, you'll be fine.
Unless you're like an Olympian. Then they can eat as much as they want because they're burning so much of it.
That's correct. Well, we're talking then about physical activity,
Right.
which when you're younger, you're more active, and even if you don't eat the right foods as much as you should, as I did growing up, I was very active, and so
Sure.
I burned a lot of the non-nutritional things
Sure.
out. So anyway, well, listen, we're going to transition as we finish the program today to discuss a little bit more about your personal life experiences and those experiences impact on your business. And let me ask you this: how important is good nutrition to anyone's personal life?
Oh, it's huge. Oh my gosh, it's so huge. I always say, if you don't invest in yourself, you're going to pay for it on the back end. So I know that when we compare oranges to Cheerios, or if we compare celery sticks to drumsticks, celery is probably going to be a little bit more expensive. Or if we're comparing, chips to that equation, adding chips into that equation, the chips are going to be a lot cheaper than your fruits and vegetables. I am fully aware of that. I'm a single mom. I get it. But at the same time, even though you are cutting cost, what you end up going to do is pay for it on the back end. So the older you get, the more you are going to be susceptible to certain diseases, diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease. And if anyone knows anyone with any of those concerns, then they also know it kind of creates this catalyst effect. So it's never just I have diabetes. It's I have diabetes and I have blood pressure, or I have kidney failure and I also have, issues with my GI or digestion tract. And so keeping those things in mind, it is literally investing into yourself. And it is financial investment, but it's going to be worth it. And it's going to be a lot cheaper. And then if you plan to be around, have grandkids or travel, you won't be able to do those things without cause or without pause.
Okay. Well, listen, Shanetta, we're out of time, but we're going to be back for another session next week.
All right.
And I'm very happy to tell our audience that you will be back and talk about some of these personal aspects of nutrition, as well as your faith. We haven't gotten into that and how that is related to your business. So we're going to go ahead and finish up, but before we do that, give our audience your contact information if anybody would like to contact you.
Absolutely. I can be found at Netta's Pantry, NETTASPANTRY, on Instagram and on Facebook. And if you want to reach out to me via email, I'm at southernrootsbynetta@gmail.com.
Okay. Well, listen, Shanetta, it's been great. And again, you're going to be with us next time, and
Absolutely.
I'll be looking forward to that. And to our audience, I'd like to say thank you for joining us. And in closing, I'd like to say that whatever you may be going through, just keep this in mind. There's always more good things coming your way. And we'll be seeing you the next time.